Okay, we're going to move on to the second half of the debate here, forum, not a debate, which is going to involve the at-large, or the, not at-large, but the write-in race for county attorneys. So at this time, we'd like to announce these candidates to come on up in no particular order and claim whatever seat they like, and then we'll do the same thing and draw A, B, and C. We'll go ahead and start it off with one of the writing candidates, Lori Zuko. Please come to the stage. Josh Jones, please come to the stage. And Scott XD, please. Starting us off will be Lori Zuko. So the first question is, on an A, B, C, D, F grading scale, what grade would you give the county attorney's office / county attorney's performance over the last 4 years, and why?
Ladies and gentlemen, I have been with the county attorney's office for the past 15 years and have served as the chief criminal deputy for the past 6. I can tell you with 100% certainty that the hard-working, dedicated, highly professional staff of the county attorney's office deserves an A+ grade for their performance over the last 4 years. And let me tell you why. Last year, Christina Guerrero won the statewide Arizona Prosecuting Attorneys Advisory Council, or APAC, award for Diversion Prosecutor of the Year for her hard work in revitalizing Care Court. 3 years ago, Michael Powell and Tricia Driggs won the statewide APAC award for victim advocacy for their trial win in the retrial of the Nathan Rojas child sex case. 2 years ago, Dallas Bullington, our technology project manager, won the APAC award for Legal Secretary of the Year for her innovative work in evidence presentation, digital evidence presentation in court that she has now shared with our other legal secretaries. And Kristana Watkins, our Grace Mental Health Program Coordinator, has garnered state and national recognition for her work in getting our seriously mentally ill population the treatment they need. Next week, Michael Powell will once again be recognized by APAC, this time for his appellate work for a case he argued at the Arizona Supreme Court to ensure that all jurors in the state of Arizona have anonymity from the press and the public when they serve as jurors. Despite everything that has been going on in the last few years, our office handled more felony cases than ever before. Over 1,500 felony complaints filed last year, a record. We handled a surge in border crime cases and homicides. We had 30 homicides in the 3-year period from 2021 to 2023, and we have had tremendous success in seeking justice for our homicide victims. Last August, our office won convictions and natural life sentences in the first human smuggling fatality case tried down here, William Brown, and our efforts were formally recognized by the Department of Homeland Security. And tomorrow morning, Felix Mendez will be sentenced to life in prison, no release possible for 25 years, for killing Wanda Stotowski on her 65th birthday at Mustang Corners while participating in human smuggling. Despite the issues that the current county attorney has had in his personal life and how public those issues have become, the office of the county attorney has continued to excel and has not let the public drama, if you will, get in the way of our doing excellent business as usual. So for this reason, the office of the county attorney and the hardworking men and women who have exhibited nothing but dedication and professionalism over the past 4 years under my mentorship and guidance as their chief criminal deputy deserve an A+ rating.
Okay, we'll move on to Josh.
In past life, I would have been a mathematics teacher, a calculus teacher. My undergrad is in mathematics, and I very quickly realized that I don't like letter grades because they don't really portray accuracy. A grade of C is average, adequate, doing what you're supposed to. And in the education world, it doesn't come out that way. I would give the county attorney's office a grade of a C+. And let me explain why. It doesn't have to do with prosecuting crimes. It doesn't have to do with doing their job. It has to do with the image the county attorney's office has given to the public, to you, to me, to us. Right? The county attorney received a DUI, and the county attorney's office lost faith with the community. They lost confidence. The community looks at the county attorney's office.
Can you speak up, please?
Oh, yes, the county attorney looks at the county, or the public looks at the county attorney's office, and they struggle with confidence and consistency. And because of that, they can't get an exceptional grade. Additionally, every single person I've talked to in the community that's not involved in the legal world has expressed a concern with the county attorney's office. Every single person. And most of those people are people that I have never had contact with previously. Every single one. Concerns with the DUI, obviously. Concerns with their perceptions of corruption. I don't know the ins and outs of those. Concerns with public records requests and the timeliness of those requests. If the public is looking at the county attorney's office with incessant concerns, with no confidence, with no faith that they're doing what they should be doing, then the grade can't be more than a C+. So I stick to that grade.
Scott?
Can everybody hear me? So first, I'd like to thank the County Bar and the Herald for inviting me here. I appreciate it, so thank you for putting this on. I think it's an important thing for us as candidates to be out in front of the residents of Cochise County, so I appreciate the opportunity to be given that. Again, when we give out a grade, nobody disputes that the people in the office aren't doing the best that they can and working their butts off. I don't think Josh disputes that. Certainly, I don't dispute that. We all understand that. But at the end of the day, there's certain indicators that at least me as a professional would look towards to determine what sort of grade I would give. And in my opinion, the grade would be a C-. The reasons I would give that grade out is first and foremost, the prosecutor's office has what's called early resolution court. And in the 3 years that I've been down here in Cochise County, I have not been able to discern any rhyme or reason as to which cases go into early resolution court and which cases start in Superior Court. The example I would give you, because I have this conversation with clients all the time, is that sometimes there's complex cases, complex matters, complex issues that for some reason or other are in early resolution court. And there's other times I will get an indicted case that to me would seem to be more apt, more fit to be processed through early resolution court, and it's sitting as an indicted case. So I believe that the lack of transparency, the lack of some sort of criteria as to which cases and how these decisions are being arrived at is something that I would want to look at as county attorney. Secondly, there are cases oftentimes that are 2, 3, 4 years or more down the road. And unless it's a complex case with serious charges, there should never be simple possession cases that are taking 2, 3, 4 years for a person to either be indicted or go into early resolution court. So what that tells me is that there is some sort of need to review the intake process, how these cases are being handled, and is it a judicious and efficient use. It's important not only for the defendants to have their day in court, but it's also important for the families and the victims involved to have their day in court as well. Finally, during my discussions with various law enforcement entities, I have become concerned that the working relationship between the officers and the county attorney's office isn't as strong as it can be. It's my belief that a new voice and a fresh perspective is something that would benefit everybody. And the great news is that the residents of Cochise County have the ability to enact that change in November.
Okay, moving on. Second question, we'll start this one off with Josh. Do you think too many cases are currently being resolved by plea agreement rather than trial for the sake of expediency at the cost of due process?
This is a loaded question for a defense attorney. It really is. I have to advocate for my client's interest. Not what I think their best interests are, but what they're asking me to advocate for. And so if they want a plea offer, I have to do everything I can to try to get that plea offer. But with that said, I think yes, too many plea offers, not enough trials. I think we should go to trial more. I really do. I think that that our attorneys, all of them, need to have the experience of trial more often. And a lot of people are going to look and say, well, you haven't been to trial as much as a lot of these other attorneys, and that's true, because I can plead the cases. I can push the cases to a plea offer. My client, I can communicate with my clients to take that plea. But when we're looking at expediency and the value of plea offers versus due process, we can never allow expediency to outweigh due process. Due process takes precedent. It always should. And sometimes, especially in early resolution court, it's very hard to feel comfortable with due process. We receive minimal information. We receive minimal time to assess a case, and there's no avenue other than rejecting a plea offer that the policy is from this point on. Once you have rejected it, all plea offers will be harsher. That's the policy. If we reject the plea offer, then not only are they guaranteed a harsher plea, they're exchanging the right to challenge an issue against the risk of challenging that issue, and that's not fair to defendants. It's really not. And an example of that is a case where you have a suppression issue, and there's not enough information in it, the disclosure that we receive in early resolution court, to examine that disclosure issue. And we lose an ERC offer to try to do it, and the suppression issue then goes away because we receive additional information, and now the client is going to get a harsher penalty. So due process should always take precedence over expediency. And I think that it would benefit our trial, or our trial attorneys, our bar, our law enforcement, and our judges, to be honest, to go to trial more, to experience trial more. It would benefit me. There are trial judges here that do go to trial quite a bit, and unless you're with one of them, you don't have the opportunity. So I think it's important for us to gain that experience.
And Scott, is the county attorney's office doing too many plea bargains?
Again, I sort of agree with Josh. Everybody's going to have to understand that Josh and I today, at least this evening, are taking off our defense attorney hats because we're running for the county attorney position, and obviously those require two different trains of thought. I sort of already addressed this when I gave out the grade that I gave out, the reasons for it. I do think that early resolution court is something that needs to be looked at, needs to be reviewed, needs to be made more transparent. And I do think that there are occasions where cases are being put into early resolution court that really should be in superior court. And it's not just for the benefit of the clients that I have to deal with on a daily basis, but it's also for the families and the victims and the victims' families, because there are some serious cases with repetitive offenders who justice would dictate that that case should run through the normal course. And the normal course is a grand jury would do the indictment. It would go through the process of pre-trials and any pre-trial motions, perhaps a settlement conference, and then on to trial. So I do think that there are occasions where those type of cases are being put into early resolution court, and it's a disservice not just to the clients themselves and their due process rights, but I believe that it could be a disservice to the victims and the victims' families. There are times that cases demand to be tried, and if I were able to be the county attorney, there would be cases sometimes that justice demands that it be tried. And so, you know, those types of cases should not be in early resolution court.
Lori, obviously you're the deputy county attorney. What are your thoughts?
Thank you. And at least Mr. Jones does acknowledge that he doesn't have a lot of trial experience. I think he's done one trial as first chair, and he has less trial experience than every single attorney in my office. Mr. Eckstein's never tried a case in Cochise County. As the only candidate here with extensive trial experience in Cochise County, including handling some of the most serious cases over the past 15 years, like first-degree murder and child molestation, I have a unique perspective on this issue. In any case, especially involving those with victims, it is always best to try to find a non-trial resolution so long as justice is achieved. Because of my extensive trial experience, I am always in favor of finding resolutions that avoid having victims testify, that making them relive their trauma, and I try to instill this belief in my prosecutors. Illustrating this, recently we had 2 defendants plead guilty to serious crimes at the last minute rather than face trial against my prosecutors. Last October, on the first day of trial in State v. EN, a case that Rachel Raines and I were handling, this man preyed upon young boys in our community for many decades, and he pled guilty to multiple child sex offenses and received a sentence of 27 years in prison. There were multiple victims, and they all supported our decision to resolve the case with a plea rather than to relive that trauma. In State v. Mendez last month, right as I was about to give my opening statement, the defendant pled guilty to the lead charge, first-degree murder, and he will receive a life sentence. The victim's daughter did not have to appear by Zoom every day for a 4-week trial, and not knowing for certain of the outcome, and only to have to deal with years of appeals. The vast majority of our cases do resolve by plea agreement, many in early resolution court. But this is due to the strong work and professionalism of our law enforcement partners. Strong cases are more likely to result in plea agreement rather than trial because the defendant would rather negotiate their sentence when they know they will be found guilty. Body cameras have also contributed to the strength of our cases, and body cameras disclosure is available in early resolution court. They have this if they want to wait the 4 weeks to get it. With the mandatory minimum sentencing scheme in Arizona, it just makes sense for defendants to plead guilty. Many of the cases that we bring are prison mandatory, and the defendants are negotiating a better sentence. A plea agreement is due process, and every defendant is given the choice to go to trial. If cases did not resolve by plea agreement, including early resolution court, our system would collapse. Neither of these gentlemen were here before ERC was started, and they don't know the cost-saving measures that it has given our county. And since I became chief criminal deputy, I did expand the due process of it and make it 4 weeks, and now we have all the digital disclosure generally available within that 4-week time frame. If we didn't have early resolution court and plea agreements, we would probably need 20 to 30 more prosecutors and defense attorneys down here. We would need additional judges. The defendants always have the choice whether to plead guilty or take a case to trial. And if someone believes too many cases are pleading, then they should be transparent about the additional taxpayer costs that will come with more trials.
Thank you very much, Laura. Let's move on to question 3, something very particular to our part of the country. This one will start out, first one to answer will be Scott. Do you believe there is a border crisis, and what do you think the role of county attorneys should be in addressing it?
It's actually my belief that there's a legal immigration crisis in this country that results in issues that our county must deal with due to our location on the border. This particular issue is something that's very personal to me. As someone who's dealt with the incredible complexity and vast bureaucracy of our immigration laws. My wife and I were separated for 27 months going through legal immigration, and absolutely no family should ever have to endure that. This is a national issue that must be addressed by both parties, period. The Cochise County attorney, like all other county attorneys along our southern border, has no authority to create national immigration legislation on their own. That being said, and I want to make this extremely clear here tonight, to the extent that that national issue brings problems to our doorstep here in Cochise County, like, for instance, drugs and human smuggling, it is the duty and the obligation of the county attorney to use all lawful means and measures to protect the health and safety of our residents in this county. It would be my intent to use those lawful means at my disposal to ensure that our residents are safe.
Thanks, Scott. On to Lori, your thoughts.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is not just a border crisis, it is a border reality. We reside in a county targeted by drug and human traffickers. The county attorney's office is a critical part of the response, and ignoring this crisis does not serve our citizens. Under my supervision as chief criminal deputy, the county attorney's office has aggressively and successfully prosecuted hundreds of human smuggling and drug trafficking cases over the past few years. Cochise County is the only county regularly prosecuting defendants for engaging and assisting human smuggling operations. We are the tip of the spear defending our county from being overrun by cartels. I say this a lot. We are the toughest border crime prosecution agency in this state, if not this country. Let me talk to you about some statistics. In 2022, we prosecuted 303 failure to yield, the felony flight cases related to smuggling, and 155 participating in the human smuggling operation cases. And the law only took effect that September. And 350 fentanyl cases. In 2023, we prosecuted 309 failure to yield cases and 437 participating in human smuggling cases. A lot of those were overlapped. And 380 fentanyl cases in 1 year alone. Ladies and gentlemen, when we started to respond to the border crisis, we initially had one prosecutor, Rachel Raines, handling most of the failure to yield cases. And then the human smuggling statute was passed. We now have every prosecutor in our office handling the failure to yield and human smuggling cases. Because we have so many different prosecutors handling these cases, we have written policies on how to resolve these cases, and they have evolved over time. We have had to increase the penalties as the problem has not gone away. Ladies and gentlemen, currently, if you flee from law enforcement, our offer to you will be prison with a Class 6 designated felony at the minimum, if not more, based upon priors and if you endanger anyone. If you pull over, you will get probation. We want to encourage that behavior. Are we tough on border prosecution? Look at our border crime fatality cases. As I said, Felix Mendez, 25 years, life with the possibility of release at 25 years because he was 16. William Brown, 2 natural life sentences for killing 2 UDAs at the Bisbee Traffic Circle. Keyston Campbell, 19.5 years for killing a UDA in a smuggling incident, and he wasn't even being pursued. He was simply driving recklessly to avoid a checkpoint. As I have often been quoted as saying, the past few years in Cochise County, we live in a video game. Well, the county attorney's office, under my direction, has and will continue to do something about that. Thank you.
Josh, same question to you.
Most of what I've addressed has been covered. We absolutely do have an immigration crisis here on the border where we live, and yeah, each of you who live here have probably witnessed or seen law enforcement with somebody who's involved in some sort of human smuggling or trafficking or drugs in the last few years. The quantity of cases that I've covered and our office have covered has risen dramatically, and any county attorney has to prosecute those cases. Any county attorney has to do whatever they can to protect the citizens, the residents of those people who live in Cochise County, and do so in a way that is efficient and effective, while not treading on to federal jurisdiction. I think that the role of the county attorney is to prosecute those human trafficking crimes. The role of the county attorney is to prosecute all of the other associated crimes that come with that. If somebody's transporting drugs, they should be prosecuted. If somebody has committed some violent crime, they should be prosecuted. The county attorney should cooperate and coordinate with local law enforcement and with federal agencies to improve and make more efficient policies that allow for the finding of and capture of and prosecution of people who are involved in this. What's amazing to me is that a lot of these defendants come from all over the United States. It's not just people from Arizona. We have people from Georgia, from New York, from Oregon, from Washington, from South. They come from everywhere, and there needs to be proactive steps taken so that people, even outside of nobody in South Dakota knows that you're going to be prosecuted harshly if you're involved in some sort of border crime. When they come to Arizona, they just don't know, and there's probably no good way to fix that other than just continue prosecuting these crimes. Ms. Zuko spoke briefly about the evolving nature of those crimes, and I have seen that. And I would join her and Mr. Eckstein in saying that as county attorney, I would be harsh on border crimes, and I think that's the only way to deter or provide any sort of deterrence for future crimes.
Moving on to the next question, we'll start off with Lori. Do you believe the county attorney has a role in ensuring election integrity and access to the ballot? How would you describe that role?
First and foremost, I believe that elections should be fair, free, and trustworthy. I believe that all Americans, regardless of political party, should want integrity in our elections. In regards to criminal election fraud, the reality is that the law gives jurisdiction for primary enforcement of criminal election laws to the Attorney General, and only in local election matters would the County Attorney's Office be able to get involved. The County Attorney's Office has and will continue to review any criminal investigation related to election fraud and integrity that law enforcement brings to us, which in the last election, there weren't any. The county attorney does play an overall role in promoting election integrity by making sure we reside in the community where citizens feel safe to vote and participate in the political process without harassment or threats of violence or criminal damage, and we will continue to do so. On the civil side, it's the county attorney's job to provide sound legal advice to the Board of Supervisors, the recorder, and the election department. They don't have to follow our advice, and some of you saw that in the last election. But as county attorney, I would continue to provide the highest quality of advice that I can, while ultimately respecting the separate responsibilities of other elected officials and other county departments. And by the way, every trial and appellate court that reviewed the advice that our office gave during the last election agreed with our legal analysis. Thank you.
Josh, same question to you.
I mean, it's basically the same answer, right? The county attorney has an obligation to ensure that elections happen properly here in the county. The county attorney needs to be in communication with the election board, with those offices that are involved in elections, so that they know what their responsibilities are legally, so that they know how candidates can be qualified as far as ballot access, that scrutiny or fleshing out process can happen, how it's supposed to happen, and so that we have qualified candidates on the ballot. As to the matter of advising the county organizations or departments on how to deal with these elections, I think that's the county attorney's responsibility to provide sound legal analysis, and it's the county as your client is an interesting situation. As a defense attorney, I am absolutely precluded from divulging my communication with my clients, and there's confidentiality and protections to the county and the departments as well, and that confidentiality should be respected. I don't believe that I would, as a county attorney, go in front of an appellate board and testify as to what I advise my clients, because the client controls confidentiality, not the attorney. But other than that,
nearly everything that Ms. Zuko said, I would join right along with.
Scott, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think the three of us agree on most of the aspects. I mean, the county attorney's role is to ensure that lawful legal mechanisms are in place, that are in place for election integrity and access to the ballot are followed. I don't think any of us dispute that. And I certainly also agree that the responsibility of the county attorney's office is to adequately advise officials whose responsibility is carrying out those duties here in Cochise County. And that the officials fulfilling their duties as it relates to both election integrity and access to the ballot are being adequately advised. So I think that we're all in agreement that that is the role of the county attorney. It is part of the job. As we've seen, it's an important part of the job.
Okay, moving on, and again, we're doing pretty well on time, so if you have questions, do drop them off there and back on the card with Christina, and we should have some time to get to a few of them. Moving on, we're going to go starting this one round off with Josh. The county attorney has a responsibility for a wide variety of departments, including planning, zoning, human resources, elections, and the health department. What managerial and administrative skills and experience do you bring to those aspects of the job?
So, I don't know, I haven't seen Mr. Eckstein's or Mrs. Zuko's resume. What I do know is that the vast majority of my life, I have not worked in the legal world. Right? I'll be 45 this year, and the vast majority of my life has been in other areas, primarily blue-collar work. I spent many years as a construction worker in various aspects. While as a construction worker, my dad was a small business owner, and he would send me out with plans. I would have me design plans that I knew had to comply with planning and zoning regulations. I had to be able to read those, I had to understand those, and I had to be able to construct whatever it was that I was doing in accordance with those plans. At the same time, I led construction crews and made sure that they also complied with all of those requirements. I then went to school, and while I was in school, my wife and I did caregiving and worked with care homes, not strictly as caregivers, but in various other capacities, taking care of adults that had developmental disabilities, and with foster kids, primarily with developmental disabilities. And we had to meet with the county representatives and the state representatives to ensure that all of the care being given and provided met the requirements. Right after law school, I went and worked at the Department of Corrections for 3 years as a corrections officer. And I can remember sitting with a bunch of corrections officers talking about administration. The entire role of the corrections officers is administration and management. It is defined as control, manage, and administer the accountability and movement of inmates to ensure the safety of the public. That's what I did every day. Sometimes 2 officers on a yard with 700 with no locks. It is an interesting situation when you have to manage 350 people. Very quickly, within a year, I was a field training officer, I was a yard officer, and I was a mentor to new and incoming officers. With a lot of responsibility in the Cochise County Office of the Legal Advocate, Ms. Zuko learned that I had a mathematics degree, and immediately I had to provide a budget and race analysis, and that's been beneficial as well.
Okay, moving on. Scott, tell us a little bit about your resume.
Sure. So the first part of my career, I actually was a prosecutor in Ohio. I was a line prosecutor and handled a range of cases, starting with misdemeanors and working my way up through all the serious cases that Ms. Zuko has mentioned as part of her experience. So I am very familiar with all the aspects that deal with at least the criminal side of what the county attorney job responsibility is. In addition to that, I was fortunate because one of the bosses that I worked for allowed me the opportunity to sit in on city council meetings and advise them, give them legal advice, as you've heard here today, which is one of the roles that the county attorney does. I was fortunate. It was not my main job, but there were times where he asked for volunteers and I was able to do that. So I am aware of and understand the processes in dealing with lay people who are involved in politics, who are involved in official capacities within the government, and have had experience doing that on a hands-on basis. There's little doubt, and we know this, that the county attorney's office has to advise the various departments and county officials on how to properly conduct their lawful duties. It's an important and a critical job. Nobody disputes that. Every resident of this county is well familiar of it by now over the last couple of years. As far as my administrative skills, I've dealt with complex cases, not only just in criminal matters, but also in civil matters, which demanded the ability to bring together a widely diverse staff to achieve specific goals, namely good outcomes for when I was a prosecutor in the state of Ohio, when I was in private practice for my clients as individuals, or whether when I worked for firms in a capacity to help them in litigation, which entailed businesses. All of that experience obviously is helpful and necessary to fulfill both parts of the job as county attorney, and it's something that I believe that I'm properly qualified to do.
Okay, Lori.
Thank you. In terms of my the managerial and administrative skills I bring to this position, I currently supervise 35 employees. That's attorneys and staff in the criminal division of the county attorney's office. I participate in the hiring process, discipline, working through difficult HR issues like maternity leave, FMLA, ADA accommodations, interpersonal conflicts. I work directly with the civil division when these issues arise, as well as the various county departments. I have been doing that in this office for the past 6 years. That, ladies and gentlemen, is institutional knowledge. During the course of my 15 years in service to Cochise County, I have developed long-standing relationships with county directors, department heads, and supervisors, and key personnel in the sheriff's department, which will be invaluable in my role as county attorney. That's institutional knowledge. As the current chief criminal deputy, I have extensive knowledge of our complex budget system involving multiple fund lines, various grants, including VOCA, HIDA, DEMA, BURN, the Rural Alternative Prosecution Grant, each with a different reporting requirement, and they are routinely subject to audit. Again, this position requires that kind of institutional knowledge. As county attorney, both the civil and criminal attorneys will rely on my 28 years of legal experience, including significant trial, litigation, government administration, and appellate experience in supervising and mentoring the attorneys, both civil and criminal, on the legal matters that they are handling. Again, institutional and legal knowledge. While we're on the topic of the civil division of our office, I want to address one issue regarding my husband, David Thorne, the presiding judge. Yes, if I am elected, he will be conflicted out of any civil matter that the county attorney is a party to, including Title 36s and public fiduciary cases. But I want to make one thing clear. My husband is the presiding judge, but he does not receive any additional pay for this, and he is not the boss of the other judges who are all individually elected officials. The Arizona Supreme Court appointed him as presiding judge, and if I am elected, we will submit it to them to determine if he can remain as presiding judge with these additional civil conflicts. No one in Cochise County will be making that decision. It will be made by the Arizona Supreme Court, and we will abide by their decision. End of story. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a non-issue. There are plenty of cases that come before the Superior Court to go around that my husband can handle that do not involve the county attorney's office as a party to those matters. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before we move on to the next question, we've had some questions already come up here. Keep bringing them up. One thing that I should clarify, this would be, if you do submit a question, maybe a question that all candidates can answer, so like, just a general question they can answer about the law or the job. Moving on to the next question, let's go to, start out with Scott. Do you have a philosophy of prosecution? What is your philosophy about being a prosecutor?
Sure. When I was a line prosecutor, one of the things that was most important was having the ability to have an excellent working relationship with law enforcement. Without that, things can break down. I would seek to ensure that the office is providing the necessary guidance and feedback to officers to aid in their investigation. I was fortunate to work for bosses, one a Democrat, one a Republican, but both bosses had the same philosophy. It was our job to assist and to help and to guide law enforcement when needed. Sometimes that meant we went out to the scene and we helped develop the search warrants. We helped do the things that were needed that law enforcement would use as a guide to begin their investigation. It's something that I thought was important, was invaluable, and it gave me as a line attorney the ability to see what our law enforcement officers are doing out in the community. As you can imagine, it's a job I don't want to have, but to the extent that I can build and foster and help that relationship, that's extraordinarily important. Secondly, it's my belief that cases need to be more efficiently processed in a timely manner. There shouldn't ever be cases lingering for years and years that are simple possession cases, that are relatively minor, low-level felony offenses that pop up for two reasons. One is it's not an efficient use of resources. When these cases come in, they should be expedited. They should have a process in place so that when officers come in with cases, they don't wonder what happened 2 or 3 years down the road. Secondly, it also prevents cases which continually come up where I have a client who may have made a mistake 3 or 4 years ago, who now has gone through college or has gone through some sort of trade, has a job, has a family, and they're facing a serious felony charge 3-4 years down the road. That simply is something that needs to be looked at, needs to be adjusted, in my opinion. So that would be part of my philosophy. Third, to seek justice, whatever that form may mean, for all the residents of Cochise County, not just the ones that agree with me. Finally, to be more transparent about why we're handling the cases in the manner that we are. To that end, and this is again something that I experienced firsthand, there is no reason why the prosecutor's office, the county attorney's office, does not submit a quarterly report which lists all the things that they've done, all the cases that they've handled. To me, this is something that would allow the residents of this community to see the transparency in how cases are being handled and the manner in which they're being handled. And it would be my philosophy and my policy to do that.
Lori, your philosophy about being a prosecutor.
Thank you. Do you know what philosophy I live by? Show me, don't tell me. I have been showing the people of Cochise County my philosophy of prosecution for the past 15 years. My opponents can tell you all day long what they say they will do if they become the top prosecutor in this county, but I don't have to tell you what my philosophy is because you've already seen it. I've spent the last 15 years in this county seeking justice for victims while still being mindful of my role as a prosecutor or a minister of justice for all parties involved, including defendants. In 1935, Justice Sutherland of the U.S. Supreme Court described a prosecutor's responsibility as strike hard but fair blows, and I agree with that. My reputation speaks for itself. I believe I am widely known as a firm but fair prosecutor who comports herself with conviction and integrity. But at the end of the day, you probably do not want to go to trial against me. Ask anyone you know in the court system, and I am widely regarded as one of the best trial attorneys in this county. But as I said, I have shown you my philosophy over the past 15 years in such jury trials as Ronald Salisbury, child pornography, prior offender with live children, guilty on all counts, 306 years in the Department of Corrections. Ramiro Preciado, raped and sodomized his 3 young biological children, guilty all counts, 9 consecutive life sentences. Some of my 6 homicide jury trials in this county. Roger Wilson, guilty first-degree murder, overturned due to a technicality, guilty second-degree murder, 20 years in the Department of Corrections. David Kennedy, killed a young victim with premeditation during a house party, guilty first-degree murder, life in prison. Francisco Lopez, attempted first-degree murder of his brother in Bisbee, guilty all charges, 40 years Department of Corrections. And Brian Benally, attempted first-degree murder, guilty all charges, 40-plus years Department of Corrections. I have supervised the drug unit for the past 6 years. When fentanyl took over as the leading drug for sale in this county a few years ago, we were frustrated in our plea negotiations by the fact that it didn't carry the enhanced sentencing that we had in meth for sale cases. I am happy to announce that the governor recently signed the bill that will remedy that, so that by the end of the year, we will have the statutory sentencing enhancements that we need to effectively fight the fentanyl crisis and strengthen our plea agreements in fentanyl for sales cases. I don't try to send everyone to prison for the longest period of time possible in every case. That would not be justice. And I have never tried a case where the defendant ultimately received a lighter sentence or beat my plea by going to trial. But again, I strive to be tough but reasonable, firm but fair, and I try to instill this philosophy into the prosecutors who work for me.
Josh, your philosophy?
Thanks. The legal world is an interesting concept because the prosecutor controls almost everything. After a criminal commits some crimes, the prosecutor exercises discretion. They are the cog that decides whether or not the mechanism is going to fail. And they have a very large and important responsibility to uphold the Constitution, number one. Their prosecution has to be founded in issues and ideas of due process and fair and adequate prosecution and providing representation for the rights and needs of victims. And all of those things are extremely important. But in the end, it all comes down to the Constitution. If the prosecutor, it doesn't matter if a person is guilty or not. If the Constitution was violated, the person's going to walk. So we have to comply with the requirements of the Constitution. And in order to do that, Mr. Eckstein touched on it, we have to be cooperating with, coordinating with, workshopping with law enforcement so that law enforcement knows what their requirements are. We have to be working with each other, the prosecutors, so that every prosecutor can see a case and know how it's going to go forth and whether it's viable to go forth. And so in the end, the prosecutor, who might have the most important role in the criminal justice system, I'm an intermediary as a defense attorney. I make very few substantive decisions. The defendant makes decisions, but only if the prosecutor gives them the chance to make those decisions. Right? They can accept or reject a plea, but the prosecutor decides whether or not they're going to offer a plea. Right? They can go to trial. The prosecutor can decide whether it goes to trial. I don't get to make those decisions as a defense attorney. So my philosophy is we follow the Constitution, we do it in a way that provides fair and adequate justice, both for the defendant, but also for victims, as their rights and their needs need to be addressed. So that the prosecutor has to be both the person saying, enacting punishment here, but embracing the victim to say, I'm listening, I'm here for you, and I'm going to represent your interests. And so my philosophy is, as long as we move forward with that, with those ideas in mind, we will accomplish what the Constitution asks us to do, which is due process.
Okay, moving on to the next question. Obviously, we talk about the Constitution and being officers of the court and all that, but we're all human beings with our own feelings and strong opinions about things. So if you were particularly opposed to a particular law that went against your personal sensibilities, Just examples of that might be abortion, or the HCR 2060, which some people call the Papers, Please law. Some things like that that people can have really strong feelings about. If you strongly oppose the law, what would you do if you were assigned to prosecute such a case? We're going to start that out with Lori.
As county attorney, part of the job is to evaluate the laws that are passed by the legislature or by ballot initiative and determine if enforcing the law is in the best interest of our county. In other words, asking, will it be struck down later? When the new participating in a human smuggling statute was enacted, we as an office took a close look at the law, and we found two subsections that we determined could withstand a constitutional challenge. And that is what we use to prosecute people who come to our county to participate in the criminal tourism of making a quick buck by coming from all over the country to Cochise County to smuggle undocumented aliens for profit. We have since become the leading prosecution office in the state on charging and convicting smugglers of that statute, and we will continue to do so if I am elected. But as far as HCR 2060 goes, which is the Show Me Your Papers legislation, everyone in this room should think about the number $300 million. That is what it cost Maricopa County taxpayers when Joe Arpaio enforced SB 1070, the last attempt at a Show Me Your Papers law. And believe me, there is no way I'm putting Cochise County taxpayers on the hook for spending that kind of money. That said, the county attorney only prosecutes cases that are investigated and submitted by police and law enforcement. The other day, both Sheriff Daniels and Chief Heiser from Sierra Vista Police Department made public their opposition to HCR 2060, calling it an unfunded mandate, and I agree with them. I will let the citizens of Maricopa County and Pima County play politics with their citizens' tax dollars. I'm not going to do it in Cochise County. And can we just not take the bait on using the abortion question as a litmus test in this very important local election? Cochise County does not have any abortion providers, and even the state legislature decided to get rid of the 1892 law. So this should not be an issue for this county attorney race. As I just said, in order to prosecute a case, law enforcement has to investigate and submit the case to our office. And I just don't see our local law enforcement investigating any of our local medical treatment providers for emergency medical procedures performed on pregnant women in Cochise County. The people of this community have too much common sense to spend their time investigating our doctors for treating expectant mothers when we have a shortage of medical providers as is in this rural county.
Josh, how do you go about prosecuting a case if you disagree with the law?
So a prosecutor's primary duty is to uphold the law. And that's what they do, to prosecute the law, insofar as the law comports with the Constitution and constitutional requirements. I have no difficulty prosecuting a case that my own scruples, I don't feel good about, because the law demands prosecution. And that's very easily seen in the work I'm doing right now. The most common question I receive is, how can you represent that person? How can you provide a fair and adequate defense? It's because the person deserves due process. It's very easy for me to disassociate the uncomfortableness of what the person is alleged to have done with providing a fair and adequate defense. And I defend vigorously and adequately and ethically. And that is easy to carry over into the prosecution when a law that I don't like, people have certain areas that they're just not comfortable with. Sometimes that might revolve with animal law, and it just doesn't feel good. It pricks them in a way that they're uncomfortable with. But when it comes to prosecution, I just can't imagine a situation where a law exists and is constitutional that I'm not opposed to prosecuting it, even if it disagrees with my own moral sensibilities. As to HCR 2060, I've had this conversation with lots of people. The current policy is somewhat strict on how, what law enforcement's allowed to push forward for those, and then the prosecution's office subsequently charges. And that's probably the right approach, because there's portions of that law that probably wouldn't stand up to federal scrutiny and probably infringe upon federal jurisdiction. And that's not our role. That's not the role of the state prosecutor. And so continuing assessing laws as they come in, new laws, and comparing them to federal scrutiny or just to scrutiny, and then whether or not they're going to infringe upon federal jurisdiction has to happen, and it would happen. But as to just prosecuting laws that I disagree with, they have to prosecute. Prosecutors prosecute.
Scott, your take.
So certainly the county attorney takes an oath to uphold the Constitution and laws of the United States and Arizona. That's an oath that I would take very seriously. And all lawful laws would be enforced, bearing in mind that there is a degree of prosecutorial discretion afforded. If an unlawful law, and I mean a clearly unlawful law, was presented to my office for charges, I would be very transparent as to why I felt that the law was clearly unlawful and why I would not prosecute the matter. I do think there's a distinction between that and something that may be questionable. And I disagree with Mizuko in that it is not the county attorney's job to discern whether the appellate court may or may not, or whether the Arizona Supreme Court may or may not enforce a particular provision of a particular law. So I think there's distinctions between stuff where it is clearly unlawful and stuff where we think, well, we're not sure what the appellate court will or won't do. That's not the role of the county attorney. The role of the county attorney is to enforce the laws of Arizona, those that are lawful. And I would be hesitant to try to speculate and to get into the minds of the appellate court or the Supreme Court in this state as to what they'll ultimately find to be valid or invalid. That is not the county attorney's role.
Okay, thanks, Scott. 2 questions left, and then we'll get on to these the few of these we got here that we can address to the field, and you can answer them or not answer them. But here we go to number 8, and then we'll start out with Josh on this. Is there anything the county attorney can do to bolster services to victims?
Probably. I get very minimal access to victims. I don't get, it is a rare occasion that I get to speak to victims or the victims voice their concerns to me. I'm sure that all of the prosecutors have had victims complain, be angry, and be upset, and there's probably some basis for that. I don't know what those are because I haven't experienced that, right? I can't go up to a victim and say, how's it going with the prosecutor's office, right? That's not an option that I have, so I don't have insight into that. But I'm sure there are ways to improve services to victims. There are programs and counseling that can be offered, provided to, because the victimization, especially with some of the violent and sexual crimes that many of the victims experience, whatever we can do to make them feel comfortable, it can be helpful. Testifying in some of those cases can be traumatizing and difficult. I had the opportunity to be assigned as a guardian ad litem in a sex case. That is an atypical experience for a defense attorney, I think, though I've seen it happen more and more lately. As I researched that, one of the things that was discussed was the testimony dogs, allowing, if it's children, to bring in a stuffed animal, something that they can provide comfort. So yeah, anything we can do to provide services to help victims feel like they are being represented, feel like their needs are being met, we need to do. What those are, I don't know. It's something I have to look at. I would have to look at when I got there, and talk to the victim advocate and the other people involved to discover where we can improve.
Scott.
So again, I can draw on experience because I was a county line prosecutor. I was also a misdemeanor, which would be justice court line prosecutor. And certainly, I understand that anytime victims of crime enter into the legal system, it's important that the office does everything to be transparent and supportive. So there were times as a line prosecutor where that meant that I would go to the family houses and speak with them and make sure that the lines of communication between the office that I worked in and the victims in the case were clearly understood, answered any of their questions, explained to them why certain things were happening, what we were waiting for, be it lab reports, tests, gun analysis, those sorts of things. That is critical, and there's no question that the county attorney's office needs to have good lines of communication with victims and victims' families. There should be resources available to the families. Back in the offices that I worked at, that included not only resources which allowed them to recover financially, either through restitution, through programs that were available, but also for mental health, because a lot of times these people are in bad shape because they're traumatized by what has occurred. And it certainly is important, it would be part of any philosophy I had as county attorney to make sure that the victims and the victims' families were tied into those services.
Laura?
Prosecutors have a special duty to victims to see that they receive justice and that their rights are protected at all stages of criminal proceedings. For the last 15 years, I have devoted my career to serving victims in Cochise County. I have spent years working with families in serious cases such as homicides, child molestation, and rape cases. The county attorney's office currently has 4 tremendous victim advocates that provide not only victim notification, which is all that they really did when I started with this office, but now they provide true advocacy to victims in this county. They are highly trained professionals. I think one is here tonight, Mary Borquez. And they handle every misdemeanor and felony case that involves a victim. And in homicide cases, every immediate family member of the deceased gets victims' rights. And we have a lot of those programs already in place, the Victim Compensation Board and the services that we can refer people to that Mr. Eckstein talked about. Our Victim Witness Unit is funded primarily through a VOCA grant. That's a Victim of Crime Advocacy. And we have been in danger of losing this under federal law in the past few years. And we have to go to the Board of Supervisors each year to provisionally put it in our budget as an ask to cover it if VOCA doesn't come through. Why should we have to do that? I think the question is, will the Board of Supervisors fund these advocate positions permanently so that we are not reliant on grants to provide a service that is mandated under the Arizona Constitution Victim Bill of Rights? And speaking of victims, I think it is important to realize what will happen with victim cases if either of my opponents, both public defense attorneys with substantial caseloads, are elected county attorney. Under the ethical rules of professional conduct and recent case law, if one of my opponents is elected, the entire county attorney's office will be disqualified from prosecuting all cases against defendants represented by Mr. Jones or Mr. Eckstein. In the context of victim services, this is significant because, for example, Mr. Jones currently represents the Desert RV shooter, Mr. Hansberry, set for trial in February 2025, finally, after lengthy and frustrating pretrial delays to our victim. Not only will that trial have to be vacated, but it will probably require a 6 to 12 month continuance while a new prosecutor from a completely different agency or a retained special prosecutor gets up to speed. So justice will be delayed to the victims of the Desert RV shooter case because Mr. Jones will cause that disqualification. And this will be true for all of his or Mr. Eckstein clients. The cost for special prosecutors to handle all of their conflict cases will be significant, ladies and gentlemen. I am the only candidate whose election would not result in disruption to services to victims, delay of trials and justice, and significant costs to taxpayers to foot the bill for conflict counsel.
Okay, before we move on to the last question, I'm just going to jump into a couple questions for Rebecca, because the last question is kind of a closing statement, so let's just get a couple of these out of the way here. It's kind of an interesting one. Cochise County attorney has not sought the death penalty in decades, if ever, despite heinous murders. I guess if a case arises in which the death penalty is legally available, what factor will you consider in considering whether to seek a death sentence? Anybody can jump in on this one or not. Another question asked, is there anything that could be done to prosecute in terms of human smuggling and load car drivers and so forth? Is there anything to be done to do more prosecution of the coordinators and recruiters behind the scenes of human smuggling cases?
I guess I'll jump in. Certainly that's what investigations are for. So it is important that when these cases come in, to the extent that they can be followed up, I see no issue as to why law enforcement shouldn't be allowed and shouldn't have the capabilities to go ahead and go up the chain. That's routine practice. Certainly was routine practice in Ohio when we had to deal with meth and other drug-related incidents. It was not unusual and certainly something that I don't see an issue with here in Cochise County.
It is occurring, and generally those cases that go up the chain to the recruiter level are referred to the feds for prosecution.
Okay, one last question here that I think is, it's kind of a plain question, but I probably worth answering before we go to final comments. It's asked, why are you not on the ballot and write-in only? I don't think that's something like that.
I'll answer. In my personal situation, and you will hear this, I didn't see it as an opportunity prior to. What occurred and what happened with Mr. McIntyre opened up an opportunity. And I felt, and you'll hear me say this in the closing statement, that I had the wealth of experience to be able to do the job well. Not just the criminal stuff, but also the fact that I have been involved with the civil side, with doing civil litigation, with having had the opportunity to be with city councils. So that's why. Prior to that, probably would have been unlikely for a Democrat to sit up here and run against a two-time incumbent. It just is not a practical reality. So from my perspective, that's why I saw this as an opportunity to give me a chance to get out in front of people, to explain who I am and why I can make a difference.
I certainly didn't want this. I'm the chief criminal deputy working for an incumbent, and he had enough signatures to get on the ballot, was challenged by a fellow Republican. But the morning that we knew that challenge was coming, I went in at 8 a.m. that morning and filed my write-in paperwork so that the good people of our office would know that we had a plan for continuity of leadership and professionalism in the county attorney's office, ladies and gentlemen. I stepped up, and I'm here to be the next county attorney.
Josh, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, and just if I understand the question, it's why are the writing candidates? Because when those signatures for Mr. McIntyre were challenged and enough of them were invalidated and he chose to agree to be removed from the ballot, it was past the deadline for any of us to submit signatures. Right? We couldn't go get signatures, that deadline had expired, and this is the only avenue to get on the general moving forward.
One other question here was actually a reminder, maybe we can get some fact checking on this. Since this is a write-in, if you don't fill in the circle, the vote doesn't count. Is that
True.
Okay, so remember to fill in the circle. All right, we've come to the end here, to the final question, which is basically going to be the sort of closing summation here in a way. Going first will be Scott, and then Lori and Josh. And the question to lead off with Scott is, what are 3 things voters should know that makes you the better candidate?
Again, I sort of stole my own thunder when I jumped in on the last question, but I saw this as an opportunity when I was considering whether I would throw my hat into the ring for this situation. And when I was doing that thinking to myself and also to my wife, who I should thank, because without her I wouldn't be sitting up here, that's for certain. I felt I was uniquely positioned to offer to the residents of Cochise County a chance to have a viable alternative to the status quo. I have a wealth of experience as a line prosecutor handling the same cases that Ms. Zucco has explained that she handles. I was fortunate to work for excellent bosses who trained me and trusted me to carry out my duties and responsibilities without micromanaging. That allowed me the opportunity to work side by side with law enforcement to ensure that justice was done and achieved for victims and their families. Second, although it wasn't part of my primary duties, I was able to gain some experience dealing with how you give advice to officials that are involved in different departments and different organizations. That was something that, although it was not my primary job, I'm familiar with, I understand, and as we've seen in this county, it's a tool that you need in the handbag. I felt that at the end of the day, I was a singular candidate running for Cochise County who has both the experience needed to do the job well and has no ongoing personal conflicts which could cost the residents of this county money. It's my belief that November offers a clear opportunity for all the residents of Cochise County to decide whether they want a new voice who offers a fresh perspective in how to ensure the health and safety of our community and create a county attorney's office that every resident can be proud of. I believe that I was that candidate, and that's why I'm here.
Lori, 3 things voters should know to vote for you.
Experience, experience, experience. What do I mean by that? First, legal and trial experience. I have the most legal and trial experience of anyone on this stage. I have 28 years of legal experience, mostly working in government offices that will be invaluable in guiding and mentoring both the civil and criminal attorneys in our office. I have done so many jury trials in my 28 years practicing law, I have lost count. I have spent the last 15 years handling some of the most serious cases in this county with excellent results. One of my opponents, Mr. Jones, has only been doing this for 5 years and has never done a trial by himself. If he were to come to work for me, he would be the least experienced attorney in my office in both years of practicing law and trials done. Ladies and gentlemen, no offense to Mr. Jones, but voting for him is like giving a 10-year-old the keys to the Ferrari or putting an intern in charge of running your multinational corporation. You wouldn't want it in your personal life or in your business, and we certainly don't want it in the county attorney's office. Second, managerial and leadership experience. I have managed and supervised a criminal division comprised of 35 men and women, staff and lawyers for the past 6 years, dealing with issues such as the massive loss of lawyers we had when I first took over as Chief Criminal Deputy in 2018 to the pandemic of 2020 to 2022, and more recently through the public controversies concerning our boss's private life. Through all of this, under my leadership, the criminal division has maintained a steady course of action, excelling in the work we do as an office. We have exceeded expectations in cases filed, homicides successfully prosecuted, and in tackling the border crisis head on. We have had big trial wins and terrific outcomes with pleas and sentencings for the worst criminal offenders, and we have had multiple attorneys and staff receive statewide recognition for the work they have done under my management supervision. And third, Cochise County experience. One of my opponents, Mr. Jones, has been in Cochise County about 5 years, and that's really all the experience he's had. He's never prosecuted a case in his life. Mr. Eckstein may have a lot of legal experience, and he may have been a prosecutor back east, but he has been here for 2.5 years, and he may have done some good things in his career, but he hasn't done them here for this community. No one in this county has ever seen him in trial or really perform any serious litigation in court. I have been with the county attorney's office, working with county elected officials, department heads, supervisors, working with local law enforcement for the past 15 years. During this time, I have been building relationships and fostering goodwill and respect in our community. I have the institutional knowledge, the respect of the leaders of our community, and the good name reputation to do this job and do it well. I am by far the best candidate for Cochise County Attorney, and I ask for your support. Thank you.
All right, Josh, bring us home.
When I started this, I told my wife I wouldn't play dirty, and I won't. I'm a country boy with country values. I grew up in a small town. My dad owned a small business, and he gave me the keys not to a Ferrari, right, but a $1 million excavator, and surrounded me by multi-million-dollar buildings when I was 10 years old, and I got the job done. All right? I'm a country boy with country values. I buck hay, I cut wood, I dig ditches, right? I get my hands dirty, and I'm okay going to work. I'm a hard worker. I like to learn. I thrive on learning. I love to learn. Right? You give me a task, and I'm going to complete it. If you ask any of the prosecutors here, if Mr. Jones tells you something, they're going to tell you you can believe it. Right? I walk into court and say, this prosecutor told me we can do this. Here's the email. I don't need to see it because I'm honest. Country boy with country values. All right? I'm not going to tell you I can do something that I can't do, and I'm not going to tell you I'm going to do something and not do it. And so if you want to know who I am, that's who I am. I'm a person who goes to work and gets it done. I might not have the 28 years experience. I might not have the prosecutorial experience, but I'm going to get it. I'm going to learn it. And if you give me the opportunity, I'll show it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Big round of applause for our county attorney, Jeff, from Cochise, shout out to thank you all very much for coming out. Everybody, like July 3rd and primary. July 3rd is the primary date, and stay tuned to myheraldreview.com for all the information about upcoming dates and everything you need to know about election 2024. Have a good night.